Hello and Assalamu alaikum. I am Kashif Kamran and I welcome you to the day 3 of the Advanced Audit and Assurance Practice to Pass webinar for December 2019 exams being organized by ACCA Pakistan. Now, the agenda of the day 3 today is to focus on the question number 2 of the exam paper. Now, just like the previous 2 days, where the focus was on the question number 1, on the day 3 today, I'll be focusing on the question number 2 of the exam paper, which is a very important question. And I'll be exploring the untouched areas from the question number 2, which I have not considered in my previous webinars available. Now, this day 3 will give you a deep insight of the question number 2 and will make you realize that what is basically the mindset of the examiner when the examiner is making the question 2 of the exam paper. And you will get deep insights about what sort of preparation you should be doing for the question number 2 of the exam paper. So let's start on with this insightful session on the question 2, and let's do a critical analysis of the question number 2 of the exam paper just to have an understanding of what exactly you should be doing when you're preparing yourself effectively for the second question of the exam paper. Now, something which is important. Now, I'll be looking at these three question 2s and all recent papers. I'll be looking at the question 2 of the September 18 exams. I'll be looking at the question 2 of the December 18 exams, and I'll be looking at the question 2 of the June 19 exams. These are the question 2 since the format of the paper was changed. We all know that the paper format for AAA was changed in the September 18 exams. And since September 18 exams, there are a total of 3 questions in exam paper. We've already done the question 1 yesterday. We are now focusing on the question 2. So we are looking into 3 recent papers because before September 18, if you go before September 18, you will see there are 5 questions in the paper. But then from September 18, the format of the paper changed. And in the format, there are total 3 questions to be attempted. All are compulsory. One of them has been done yesterday, and we're doing the second question today by taking into account the 3 latest paper where the question number 2 is available. Now, the recommended articles. How you should be preparing yourself for the question 2, and I'll make you realize through my session today that how important these articles are when you're preparing yourself for the second question. The first article is completing the audit. The second article is evaluation of misstatements. The third article is the new audit report. And the fourth article is the exam technique article part 5, which is on the audit report. And this exam technique article will be shared with the day 5 resources, but the other 3 articles have been shared as the resources for the day 3. And all of you must have got these resources, or you can download these resources from the handout section of the webinar. Now, 4 articles, must to read articles if you want to have a better preparation of the question number 2. So completing the audit, evaluation of misstatements, the new audit report, and exam technique article part 5 on audit report. These are 4 fundamental articles, and I'll make you realize why these are 4 fundamental articles when you're preparing yourself for the second question, because you need to understand at what point of audit or at what stage of audit the question number 2 is set. So let's unfold the question number 2 and let's see how these articles can contribute towards your success in the second question. Now for the question 2, which is of 25 marks, how much time a student should be spending on the question number 2? And we got the formula of the time spent from the day one of this webinar. And I've been using that formula very consistently on the very first day and then on the very second day. And I'll be using the same time spent formula on the third day for the question number 2, which is worth 25 marks. Stage of audit at which the question is set. Because if you don't realize the stage of audit at which the question number 2 is set, you will not be preparing yourself effectively and you will have no idea what sort of topics can come in the question number 2. But if you know the stage of audit at which the question is set, then automatically you are better prepared for taking on the question number 2, and you will be knowing that what the examiner can ask you within the second question. And the last thing, topics examined. What sort of topics are examined within the second question? So let's explore the answers to the three things: the time spent, stage of audit at which this question is set, and the topics examined. Now, the time spent formula is the same, which I defined on the day one. 25 minutes multiply by 1.95, and I hope all of you know from where this 1.95 has come from, or else you need to see the recording of the day one to see from where 1.95 has come from. So 25 minutes into 1.95 minutes per mark, we have a total time of 48 minutes and 75 seconds to do the question number 2. Now we know that out of this total time, the reading and planning time has to be 1/4 and the writing time has to be 3/4. So from the 48 minutes approximately, you take 1/4 as your reading and planning time for the question number 2, which is 12 minutes. And then you have the writing time, and that writing time is 37 minutes, which is the 3/4 time. Now, so we have the question 2, right, which is worth 25 marks. And when you multiply the 25 marks with 1.95 minutes, you get a total time of like 49 minutes to do this question. And from the 49 minutes, you have 12 minutes for the reading and planning time, and you have 37 minutes of the writing time, right? You have 25 marks for the question number 2. So you have 25 marks in the question number 2. And from the 25 marks, you have 49 minutes to do it. And 12 minutes of reading and planning time, that's quite a lot. If you see the length of the question 2, that's not a very big question. So within 12 minutes, you're going to have a very good reading and planning time. And 37 minutes, when you look at the question 2, is a very good time to do it. So you need to fit this question within the stipulated time, because one of the critical success factor of the AAA paper is that you need to complete it if you want to pass. If you come out of the exam hall with an incomplete paper, now that's a big challenge. So your first barrier should be to complete a paper. And that is how you can complete the paper, right? With the proper time management, where 1/4 of the time is spent on reading and planning, and 3/4 of the time is spent on writing. So that is the equation for the second question of the AAA paper, the time spent. Now comes a more important question: the stage of audit at which the question 2 is set. The question number 2 of the AAA paper is set at the completion and reporting stage. See this stage. Yesterday and day before yesterday, when I was looking at the first question, we know the first question is set at the planning stage, and even the first question can ask you the stage where you accept a new audit client. Now, when you're looking at the question 2 today, the question 2 is set at the stage of completion, and the question number 2 is set at the stage of reporting. So at a completion stage and at a reporting stage. Now, what exactly happens at the completion stage of the audit, or what exactly happens at the reporting stage of the audit? Because if you have no idea of what major activities take place at the completion and reporting stage, you will not be having the holistic view of the question number two. So let's see what can be a holistic view of the question two and a holistic view of the major activities which goes into the completion and reporting stage. The first one, review of the working paper file. We know the most important thing which happens at the completion stage of the audit, when the audit is in the finalization stage, is the review of the working paper. Now, you must have seen many times a typical question which comes on evidence, and where the examiner says you are a manager and you are reviewing the working paper file. What evidence will you expect to find in the working paper file? This is a very typical question, right, in the AAA exams, and all of you must have seen this question in the past paper, which asks you, being a manager, you are reviewing the working paper file, and what evidence you expect to find in the working paper file. Now, I have covered this question in my previous webinar multiple times, and I'll be giving you the links of the previous webinar where you can go down and solve this question. So you need to see the previous webinars for review of the working paper file, because this question has been done so many times in my previous webinar. I have given the complete breakdown of this question. I've given the complete marking scheme of this question, and I've given a complete analysis of this question, that how the question is set on evidence. And when you are reviewing the working paper file at the stage of completion, what and how you write the evidence. So that's one major activity, right, which gets examined in the question number two. The next one, at the finalization stage, communication of matters to those charged with governance. Now that's so important. What sort of matters will you be communicating to those charged with governance when you're finalizing the audit? Now imagine within the audit, there must be several problems, several issues. There must have been weaknesses in the internal control systems, or there must have been an accounting issue that the management is not recognizing something properly. So at the finalization stage, you need to accumulate the problems you identified during the course of audit, and you accumulate the issues you identified during the course of audit. And at the finalization stage, you communicate these matters. You communicate these matters to those charged with governance. And this is an examinable part of the question number two, that the examiner can ask you to identify and explain the matters which you should be communicating to those charged with governance. And we have seen this question in the June 19 exams, the very recent one. In the June 19, the examiner did ask a question in the question number two, that what matters will you be communicating to those charged with governance. So at the finalization stage, this is a very important communication. And if a student have no idea of this communication or the importance of this communication, you're not prepared well for the second question. So either it could be the review of the working paper as an activity at the finalization stage, or it could be the communication of matters to those charged with governance at the finalization stage. Then look at the number three. And I'll be covering this communication of matters to those charged with governance today, even though I've covered it previously, but this is an emphasizable area. I have done evidence so many times that I'll not be touching upon evidence, but at least I'll be touching upon communication by looking at the June 19 paper in my session today. Number three, ethical, professional, and quality control issues arising from an engagement quality control review undertaken at the completion stage. Now, I think you must have seen this question so many times, a regular feature of the AAA paper, that the question two says, you are an engagement quality control reviewer, or you are an engagement quality control manager, and you are performing a review. And in the review, There must be many ethical issues, many professional issues, and many quality control issues which you must have identified. So we know there is a typical question which comes at a completion stage of the audit when there is a quality control review being performed. And through the quality control review, many issues have been identified. And the examiner asks you to identify and explain those issues and then recommend a safeguard or then recommend an action. So a typical question on ethical, professional, and quality control issue, which is identified at the completion stage of the audit. And again, this is a question which I've done so many times in my previous webinar. So you can explore my previous webinars. I'll be giving you links of my previous webinars where you can see the demonstration of the answer for ethical, professional, and quality control issues which arise through the um, engagement quality control review. Then another very important activity which happens at the completion stage is the evaluation of misstatements. Now, obviously, during the course of the audit, you must have identified many misstatements. You must have identified many accounting misstatements. And as an auditor, you are very concerned about misstatements. You must be concerned about what is the impact of the misstatement on the audit report. So a typical question which comes on evaluation of misstatements have come so many times in the past paper, and I'll make you realize, even though I've done it in my previous webinars, but I'll do an example today even, that evaluation of misstatement is such a typical question where in the exam paper, you get the misstatements and you need to evaluate them. And you need to evaluate the misstatement whether it is material or whether it is immaterial, and you need to evaluate the misstatement for its impact on the audit report. So this is another activity which takes place at the completion and reporting stage, that you need to evaluate the misstatements. And I'll try focusing on this today, and the communication with those charged with governance. And then the final reporting stage, a typical audit report question, because the question is also at the reporting stage. So getting a typical audit report question, and you must have seen the past papers are flooded with reporting questions. You see the past papers from June 15, December 15, 2016, 2017, 2018, and you'll find so many reporting questions. And I've covered this so many times, reporting so many times in my previous webinar. So a typical question on reporting, I'll not be doing in this question because I've done it so many times in my previous webinar, and I'll give you the link of that. Quality control issues, I've done so many times in my previous webinar, I'll not be touching upon them. Working paper file and a review of the working paper file, I'll not be doing that because I've done it so many times. So ideally, I'll be looking at the communication of matters to those charged with governance. And ideally, I'll be looking at the evaluation of misstatement and any other requirement which comes in question 2 when I unfold September 18, when I unfold December 18, and when I unfold June 19. So is everyone clear about the types of activities which do take place at the completion stage? Have you ever wondered, have you ever thought about the types of activities which takes place at the completion stage from an examination point of view? And if you have an idea about the types of activities which takes place at the completion and reporting stage, are you better prepared to handle the question 2? If you see my bullets, you can get a question on review of the working paper in the question number 2. You can get a question on communication of matters in the question number 2. You can get a question on ethical, professional, and quality control issues in the question number 2. You can get an evaluation of misstatement as a question in the question number 2. And you can get a typical audit report question in the question number 2. So should you know the holistic picture of the question 2? Because for most of the time, the student believes that the question 2 is only a reporting question. So is everyone clear that a question 2 is not just a reporting question, rather it is a completion and a reporting question. So anything can come right in the question 2, not just reporting, even completion. So we need to understand the stage at which the question number 2 is set. Right now, just before I go more deep inside, into the question number 2 and more deep insight into the completion and reporting stage, and make you realize the importance of completion and reporting stage by taking on the past papers. One final thing which I need to discuss, the types of activities and types of questions I've done in the previous webinar. I'll not be repeating them. So I want to give you a link of those previous webinars. Now, review of the working paper file is one of the activity which do takes place at the completion stage. I just mentioned that. And in my previous webinars, you can see here, I have covered them. I've given you 2 links of my previous webinar, and you can explore these 2 links to watch these 2 webinars and be very effectively prepared on evidence. So if a typical question comes on review of the working paper file and the evidence you should be writing in the working paper file, I've covered this question multiple times in my previous webinar. This is the question, right? And this question have been drilled so many times in my previous webinar. So you can explore this question and the marking scheme of this question and how to do this question, which has been in front of you as the very first bullet. So if you want to explore the question, comment on the methods, and you want to know what methods are, or you want to know the breakdown of the meta, or you want to know the marking scheme of the methods, you have to go and see my previous webinars. And if you want to see how to write audit evidence and how we explain audit evidence to the examiner, then you need to see my previous webinars for this particular question. So I'll not be touching upon this question within my session today. The next, ethical, professional, and quality control issues. I've covered them so many times in my previous webinars. I've given you the previous links of the webinars here. You can go down, explore these links, and be better prepared on a question on ethical, professional, and quality control issues. You want to know the marking schemes, you want to know how to write it, you want to know how to identify the issues. Everything has been covered in my previous webinars. So I hope you will click these links and you will explore these videos and you will go through them and you will take your effective notes and then start to practice questions on ethical and professional issue. So is everyone clear with this? That I'll not be touching upon the areas which has been done and delivered in my previous webinars from the question 2, so that this webinar gives you something additional, something more than what has been done in the previous webinar. The last thing, reporting issues. Typical question on reporting. I have done so many times the typical question on reporting. I have done the reporting questions so many times. You can see the links here. In almost every webinar I do prior to December 19, I have covered reporting as a fundamental area. And I've given you some hyperlinks of my reporting webinars, which you can go and watch. I've covered each and every aspect of a reporting question which comes in AAA. Whether it is evaluation of misstatements, I've covered that. Whether it is multiple reporting issues as a question, I've done that. Whether it is a critical appraisal of the report, I've done that. So I've done every type of question in my previous webinar. So I just need a feedback from your side. For all the topics in the question number 2, which I have done previously, I'll not be spending time today on those topics. Rather, I'll be spending time on topics which have been untouched from the question 2, so that from the previous webinars and from this webinar, you have a 100% definition of the question 2. Is that clear with all of you? So this webinar plus my previous webinars, right, will give you a perfect definition of the second question. So I have given you the hyperlinks, right, of my reporting webinars. I've given you the hyperlink of my webinars where ethical and professional issues have been covered. And I've given you the hyperlinks where I've covered evidence. So I hope everyone is sound and clear on that. So we are exploring more issues today, and we are exploring a very critical analysis of the second question today in the webinar, so that you have a very clear definition of the second question. Okay, now before I start my practice of the second question, let me make you realize the importance of the completion and reporting stage. Right. Now, if I take you to the website where the technical articles have been put in by ACCA for AAA, you can see this exam technique article right in front of you. The very first one, the very first link on your screen, exam technique for advanced audit and assurance part 5. I recommend this article today, that you have to read this article so that you are very good on reporting and you know what your examiner expects from you on reporting. So this is a must to read article, the very first one, exam technique for advanced audit and assurance part 5. Okay, then you go down and you can see this article here, evaluation of misstatement. Such an important article, so that you know at the completion and reporting stage, how do the auditor evaluate the misstatements? Because you identify the misstatements during the course of the audit, right? But how you evaluate these misstatements, you should know them. There are questions and questions and questions in the past paper on evaluation of misstatements. And if you want to be good on that, you need to watch my previous webinars. And then more importantly, you need to read this article. Okay, then you go down. Look at this article. Completing the audit. Such an important article. If you want to know as a student what exactly happens at the stage of completion, I have no idea. Have you ever read this article? If you read this article, Completing the Audit, you will be amazed to know the definition of the completion stage of audit. And if you want to have a sound definition of the completion stage, you want to have a good definition of what happens at the stage of completion, then you need to read this article. So this is a very good article on the activities which takes place at the completion stage of the audit. So do explore this article, Completing the Audit. Then you go further down. There is an article here which is having a title, Auditors Report to Those Charged with Governance. Now, this is what I was discussing with you today, that in the second question, the examiner expects from you that you should know communication with those charged with governance. And if you read this article, Auditor Report to Those Charged with Governance, you will be amazed to know what sort of matters, the auditor communicate to those charged with governance. So see, there is a support available, but I have a serious issue with students that they don't explore this. They don't go and visit these articles. They don't read these articles. If you want to be very good on in AAA, I normally suggest that articles have to take precedence over the textbook. You can read textbook for those areas where the articles have not been written, but where there is a fundamental article, you should read the article, because that's the examining team article and the examining team has to set the paper. So I hope you realize the importance of these articles. I have been recommending articles on day 1, then day 2, and today I'm recommending more articles to you. I hope all of you are making a list of these articles and you will be ensuring that you will read these articles, right? So wherever you find an article, read the article over the textbook. And if you think there is a topic of which there is no article, then obviously you need to go down and read the textbook for that. So these are fundamental articles, right? And then see the last one, examining evidence. Now, a lot of times the students have issues about how to write evidence in the exam paper. Have you ever read this article, examining evidence? Have you ever gone through this article, examining evidence? If I can get your feedback, how many of you have ever read this article, examining evidence? If you read this article, you will be amazed to know how to write evidence. So please, you still have good time before you enter the exam hall. 2nd of December, right, is your exam paper. And you have so good time to read these articles. And if you want to assure that you are successful in the December exams for AAA, you need to read these articles, because these articles will open your mindset about the question number 2, and these articles will open the mindset of anything which comes in question 2. You can do it. You know the examiner even tests the knowledge, right? So if the examiner tests any knowledge from the articles, what will you do? You should be prepared for that, right? So these are articles which you should be going through. Some of the selected articles I have already given you as my resources of day 3. If you see my day 3 resources which have been shared with you, you will see some of the selected one have already been shared, and rest you can take from the ACCA website. Completing the audit. That is must. And I thought I should share this with you because I don't want any compromisation on this article. You need to read this article, completing the audit. Then you go down through my handout of articles. You should be reading another article here, which is evaluation of a statement. Must to read. Then you go down this article and you find another article, the audit report. This is must to read article, audit report. If you want to know the fundamentals of audit report, if you want to know the structure of the audit report, if you want to know the knowledge of the audit report, then this particular article is very important. So I've recommended you so many articles over the website, and I have included some of them in my handout so that at least you have the downloadable version of them and you can go through and read through these articles, right? So these are fundamental articles to prepare you for the question number 2, and that's how you should be preparing them with. Okay, now that's bringing us one step closer to the start of the practice for the second question, and that's also bringing us to the Word file now. Now, day 3 Word file, and everything which is written on this Word file will be shared with you over the WhatsApp groups, and you should be participating effectively in those groups to get these files. Okay, now what we should be doing? Question number 2 and insights of the question 2. Now, when we look at the insights of the second question, we know this question is set at the completion stage. Completion stage and the reporting stage. And the examiner has given you the support. If you just look at the completion stage first, the examiner has given you so much support on the completion stage. You want to be good on completion stage? There is an article which says completing the audit. Completing the audit. Right? There is an article, audit report to those charged with governance. There is an article examining evidence. There is an article evaluation of misstatements. There are so many articles the examiner has written just on the completion stage. And then there are so many articles on the reporting stage. What examiner expects from you from the reporting stage. The exam technique article, part 5, exam technique article, part 5 on report. The article itself, which I've shown you, and I've shared that with you in my articles for the session today, the new audit report. The new audit report. So you have so much support on the question 2. And if you read these articles mentioned on your screen, some of them have been shared with you. Some of them I've shown you over the website of ACCA. And if you make a habit of reading these 6 articles, you will be so better prepared for taking on the second question and the knowledge that is needed for the second question, right? So completion and reporting stage articles, that's one thing in terms of insights of the second question. Now, I want to explore with you the completion stage a bit before I start on with the exam practice. Okay, if I take on the practice questions and then connect that with the completion stage, the very first practice question we are doing today to make you realize something is the question from June 19 exams, right? This is the question in front of you, and this is a question from the very recent paper uploaded on ACCA website, which is basically June 19. And in the June 19 exams, this one, the first requirement of the June 19 exams, question number 2A, was about a critical appraisal of the report. And I have covered the critical appraisal of the report so many times in my previous sessions that I'm not touching upon it. So you can watch my previous webinars and you can then do this question as your self-practice for critical appraisal of the report. So that is the requirement number 2A. You can see the requirement 2A says that you have to critically appraise the extracts of the draft audit report, and you have 10 marks out of the 25 marks. And this is the requirement which I have been consistently doing in my previous webinar. So then look at the B requirement of the question 2 from June 19 exams. And this has a very important requirement which I need to do with you. It says, from the information provided above, recommend the matters which should be included in Eddy and Company report to those charged with governance and explain the reason for their inclusion. Eddy and Company is the audit firm, right? So examiner is asking, recommend the matters which should be included in Eddy and Company report to those charged with governance and explain the reason for their inclusion. What matters will Eddy and Company include in their report to those charged with governance? Not to the shareholder, right? The question is not on the audit report to the shareholder. I hope everyone is picking that. The question is on the matters which should be included in Eddy and Company report. To the shareholder? No. To those charged with governance and explain the reason for their inclusion. And we have 15 marks. And we know in a reporting question, everything is worth 1 mark. So recommend the matters which should be included and explain the reason for their inclusion. So every recommendation of matter will give me 1 mark, and every reason will give me another 1 mark. So which matter should be included in a report to those charged with governance and why I should be including those matters. Now, have you ever thought about that this is where the article exists, that the examiner is asking you in the question number 2 of the June 19 exams, question number 2 of the June 19 exams, part B, which is for 15 marks. The examiner is asking you, recommend the matters which should be included in the audit report to those charged with governance and explain the reason for their inclusion? Why will you include it? Now, you know that there is one audit report which goes to the shareholder, right? If I can get your quick answers, let's be interactive. Do you know there is an audit report which goes to a shareholder? Yes. And you get a question on audit report to shareholder, right, in the exam paper, right? Over here, is the examiner asking us the audit report to shareholder? In this question, is the examiner asking us the audit report to shareholder? No. The examiner is asking us the audit report to the those charged with governance, which is also known as a management letter. You must have heard this word management letter somewhere in your AA paper, audit and assurance paper, that as an auditor, we do write a management letter, which is a report, to those charged with governance, which is basically the report to the directors of the company. So recommend the matters that should be included in the audit report to those charged with governance and explain the reason for their inclusion. Now, you go back and see this article which I was just recommending you. See in front of your screen the very first article. Can you see the title of the very first article? This is such an old article. Audit report to those charged with governance. Such an old article. And the examiner asked this in the June 19 exams, that you need to recommend the matters which you should be communicating in the audit report to those charged with governance. Can you see the title of this article? And now can you see the requirement of the June 19 question? So are all of you amazed to see this? Are all of you amazed to see this? The title of the article and the requirement of the question June 19. And have you realized within a minute the importance of reading the article? Right. So if I click this article, audit report to those charged with governance, if I click this, the article opens, and then in this article, it tells you, the matters to be communicated. Can you see this big heading here? And if you know this article, and from this article you have read this paragraph, matters to be communicated, examiner is giving you examples and examples and examples of matters to be communicated. And now when you see this question of June 19, which says recommend the matters which you should be communicating to those charged with governance, isn't it the easiest question in exam paper? Do you realize this is an easiest question? Yes, the audit report to those charged with governance is also known as a management letter, right? Now, examiner is saying recommend the matters which you should be communicating to those charged with governance. And that's exactly the title of the article. And that's exactly where the examiner has written an article, and such an old article. I think this is like 3-4 years old article, such an old article. So if you know these matters from the examiner article, and you can adapt them to case study, can you have a good answer to write for 15 marks? If I know the matters from the examiner article and I can adapt them to the case study, will I be able to write a good answer for 15 marks? If I can get your answers to this quickly. So have you realized the importance of this article now? So I hope everyone will be downloading this article today, right? Once the session ends down. That is the audit report to those charged with governance. Now, see what examples the examiner is giving us in the article. See the examples. The first example, the examiner says the overall approach and scope of the audit, including any limitation on the scope of the audit. So in the report to those charged with governance, you will be telling any limitation on scope of the audit. If there was any limitation during the audit on the scope, you will be telling this to the management. Number two, accounting policies that could materially affect the financial statement. If you think there was a wrong accounting policy, you should be telling them to the management. Any wrong accounting policy, you should be telling that to the management. If there was any scope limitation, you should be telling the scope limitation to the management. Number three, adjustments arising as a result of audit procedures. Any adjustments? If you want to pass any adjustments, the debits and credits, so you will be telling the adjustments to the management. Number fourth, material events or uncertainties which could jeopardize the going concern status. If there are any going concern issues, you will also be communicating the going concern issues through this letter. Number fifth, disagreement with management. If you have any disagreements with management, you will also be communicating those disagreements to those charged with governance. Look at the number second last, any expected modification to the report. So if there is any expected modification, like you want to issue a qualified opinion, or you want to issue an adverse opinion, so any expected modification to the report, you're also communicating that to the management. And lastly, any weaknesses identified in the internal control system. So any weaknesses you identified in the internal control systems, you should also be communicating them to the management. See how many examples, almost 7 examples given by the examiner in this article. And then in the June 19 exam, the examiner put you in a question. Recommend the matters which should be included in the audit report to those charged with governance. Now, when you take the knowledge of the matters from the article is saying that these are the matters. Number one, let's quickly write them down and then connect them with a case study. The number one matter coming from the article was a wrong accounting treatment, a wrong accounting policy. Number two, scope limitations. Number three, any adjustments. Number fourth, any going concern issues. Number fifth, any disagreements you have with management, any disagreements. Number sixth, any expected modification of the report, expected modification of report. And number last, any weaknesses in the internal control systems. Isn't that easy to remember for exam paper? And when the examiner gives you a case study on the matters to be included in the report to those charged with governance, do you believe the examiner will give you anything out of the 7? Definitely. So if you know these 7, will you be able to identify the matters to be communicated to those charged with governance from the case study? Some of them will be in the case study, right? But you need to justify, explain the reason for their inclusion. Why will you be including them? So it's not just identifying the matter to be communicated, but it's more importantly to explain the reason for their inclusion. Then only we'll get the 1 mark. So I hope everyone is sound on the article and the examples given in the article of the situations you should be communicating to those charged with governance, right? 1 mark per mark here, right? So if you look at the marking scheme here, the marking scheme is 1 mark per valid matter, 1 mark per valid matter. So at least you're writing 1 mark per valid matter plus 1 mark for reason. So that is how you will accumulate your 15 marks, right? So 1 mark for the matter and 1 mark for the reason why you will be including it in the report to those charged with governance, right? So it's the marking scheme is 1, right? 1. And how much time you have to write it? 15 marks multiplied by 1.95 minutes. How much time we have to write this 15 marks answer? If I can get the quick answers from the Students, okay, 29.2 minutes. And out of the 29.2 minutes, how much time I have for planning? My planning time is 7.3 minutes. And how much time I have for writing? My writing time is 21.94 minutes. So quite a productive time, right? To link the article with the case study. Okay, let's read the case study, right? Let's identify what are matters within the case study and how close they are to the article written by the examiner. So is everyone sound on the article, and has this encouraged you to read this article? So is everyone encouraged to read through this article? Such an important article, right? Now let's read the case and let's see what are matters within the case which we should be identifying. Okay, I'm reading from here, and let's see what matters should we be communicating to those charged with governance. Your firm, Eddie, has asked you to perform an independent review of the working paper of Taylor, which is a listed entity and has been an audit client of your firm for last 10 years. The audit fieldwork is almost complete, and as part of your review, you have been asked to advise the audit team on drafting of the report to those charged with governance. So you have been asked to advise the audit team on drafting of the report to those charged with governance. So in the exam, it is very important to read, right? Are we writing a report to the shareholder, or we are writing the report to those charged with governance? A lot of time the student just look at the word report and they conclude that this is a report to the shareholder. Should you be reading the complete sentence to identify the report is to the shareholder or the report is to those charged with governance? Taylor Company is a discount food retailer which operates 85 stores nationally. The financial statement for the year ending 30th of April recognized a revenue of 247 million, profit before tax of 14.6 million, and total assets of 535 million. You know why the examiner gives you the numbers? To identify the materiality. So if we want to identify the materiality, or if we want to comment on the materiality, then for materiality, we should know that the revenue is 247 million, profit before tax is 14.6 million, and the total assets are 535 million. Okay, now let's read the next paragraph to identify the issues. After a rapid period of expansion, 20x9 has been a year in which Taylor Company has strengthened its existing position with the market and has not acquired any additional store or business. So everything is going smooth so far, right? The company's draft statement of financial position for 20x9 include a property portfolio of 315 million, all of which are legally owned by the company. So they have a property portfolio of 315 million, which are legally owned by the entity. In the current year, the company has chosen to adopt a policy of revaluing a property. So that's fine. The company can choose to adopt a policy of revaluing. The company has a choice whether to recognize them at cost or to adopt a policy of revaluing its property portfolio. So during the year, they've chosen to adopt a policy of revaluing its property portfolio. So that's a right policy, nothing wrong with that. The IAS 16 gives you a permission to record your properties at the revalued amounts for the first time, and this is reflected in the draft figure for 20x9. So the company has changed the accounting policy, and this has been reflected for the first time in the draft figures. The audit work on property, plant, and equipment, including testing a sample of revaluation. Eddy and Company requested at the planning stage that independent external valuation reports should be made available to the audit team at the start of the final audit visit. A number of these documents were not available when requested, and it took 3 weeks for them to be received. Is this the first issue, that a number of these documents were not available when requested, and it took 3 weeks for them to be received by the audit team? So is this the first issue I should be communicating to the management, that it took a lot of time for us to get the documents? Obviously, this must have resulted in the delay of the audit, or it must have resulted in the inefficiency of the audit. So do you all believe that a number of documents which were requested, it almost took 3 weeks for the documents to be received? So should this be taken as the first issue? Now let's find the issues from the case. The issue from the case, number one, I'm making just a sketch answer. The first issue we got from the case is um, the documents requested from the management almost took 3 weeks to almost took 3 weeks to be received by the audit team. To be received by the audit team. Now that why will you communicate? Right, we're not categorizing the point into the categories above, right? The category above is just the 7 over here is just an example given by the examiner. But should we just stick to the examples given by the examiner, or should we adapt? So we got the first example from the case study, that the documents we requested from the management almost took 3 weeks to be received by the audit team. I hope everyone agrees this is a point which we should be communicating to management. But why? The reason the reason why we should be communicating is to the management is that this must had cost inefficiencies. This must have caused inefficiencies in the audit. This must have caused inefficiencies in the audit and must had delayed the audit work on revaluation. So do you all agree with the why here? That if the auditor is getting evidence on a late basis, right? The problem with students is that you look at these 7 examples in the article. Will the examiner give me the marks to categorize the example from the case with the article? Am I getting marks to tell examiner that the first issue relates with scope limitation? Will I get marks for that, or will I get marks for identifying a matter and telling why it should be included? A lot of students in the live session is doing what? That you're just classifying the issue among the 7 we got from the article. Am I getting the marks for telling examiner that where it is falling, or am I getting marks for writing why I should be communicating this to the management? So is everyone sound on the very first point? Do everyone realize that the first point should be communicated? If I can get your answers quickly. Do all of you realize this first point should be communicated to the management, and the reason why? Right? Let's go down reading the second one. No, there is no need to give headings, right? There is no need to give headings. And even if you want to make headings, you should make headings from the case study rather than you're learning the rote learn headings. Yes, so anything which hinders the audit work, right? Anything which affects the audit work should be communicated to those charged with governance. Okay, let's read the case further. I'm reading after the red line, where I ended the red line, right? So no need to number them, right? I'm just using a sketch answer, so that's the reason I'm numbering them. You need not to number them. That's not the way of writing the answer in AAA. I'm just numbering them because I'm just trying to identify the number of points. Okay, I'm reading after the red line. The audit working paper also identified that on a review of the non-current asset register, there were four properties. There were four properties with a total carrying amount of 11.1 million, which had not yet been revalued and were still recorded at the depreciated historic cost. Is this the wrong accounting treatment? Because when we revalue the class of asset. So when I was revaluing my properties, should I revalue every property? Do everyone recognize this accounting rule? That when we revalue the entire class of asset, right? So there were 4 properties which had not yet been revalued and are still being recorded at the depreciated historic cost. So is this the wrong accounting treatment? We should have revalued the entire class of asset. So how much is the value of these 4 properties? $11.1 million. So can we identify the materiality of $11.1 million? The total assets of the company, was 535 million. So can you divide 11.1 million with 535 million to identify the materiality of these 4 properties? Okay, that's 2.07%. Okay, thank you. So 2.07% is the materiality of the $11.1 million worth properties which has not been revalued. So I'm getting my second point, 4 properties which were not revalued. Okay, let's remove the numberings because you get confused with everything I do on the screen. The first one, document requested from the management almost took 3 weeks to be received, and why it should be included. I got 1 mark for the matter and 1 mark for the reason, 2 marks. Now the second issue, 4 properties which were not revalued. My first point to the examiner, 4 properties were not revalued. And my first point to the examiner would be, I'll find the materiality of these 4 properties, and that is 11.1 divided by, how much was the total assets? 535 million perhaps, right? And the percentage I got was 2.07%. So hence it's material. So how many marks will I get to identify is it material or not? What's the rule of thumb in AAA paper? Whenever you do the determination of materiality, how many marks you get for determination of materiality in across the paper, in across the 100 marks paper? Yes, 1 mark. So you get 1 mark for this. Then you will tell that this is a wrong accounting treatment. You will tell this is the wrong accounting treatment, and that's the reason you should be communicating it to those charged with governance, because the as per the accounting standards, you there is no number for putting the name and the reference number of the accounting standard. So as per the accounting standards, the entire class of properties should had been revalued. So this is a wrong accounting treatment, and that's the reason that you should be communicating it to the management. Now, when you believe there is a wrong accounting treatment, which is material, which is 2.07% of the total assets, and you're communicating it to the management because it's material, do you also need to communicate to the management the adjustment necessary? 1 mark for the wrong accounting treatment. Do you believe that I should also be telling management the adjustments which are necessary? See this point you got from the article, any adjustments, wrong accounting treatments. So should I be telling management what should be the adjustment? Adjustment necessary should also be communicated. Should also be communicated. Telling TCWG the correction needed, or the adjustment needed, or the adjustment needed. So do you believe your non-current assets are materially misstated? Because 4 properties were not revalued. So the non-current assets are materially misstated for that reason. And that's the reason you're asking management that there is a need to adjust them. There is an adjustment necessary. Wrong accounting treatment, and it has a materiality. See, you're gaining your marks. I'm not solving the full 15 marks, right? You need to see the examiner answer for that, but I'm just giving you a clue that if you read the article and you do this exam paper, you get more confidence. Yes, I did mention that the entire class of properties should be revalued. When you're telling management the wrong accounting treatment. So you're also telling management why it is the wrong accounting treatment, right? See this line over here. Okay, let's go back to one more example and cut short this question. You can do the rest yourself. The next paragraph. The audit supervisor review of Taylor Company board minutes identified that the company has renovated a car parking facility. So the company has renovated a car parking facility of its 17 stores, which has resulted in a significant increase in customer numbers and revenue at each of these locations. So the car parking facility has resulted in more customers visiting you, and it has resulted in more increase of revenue for the business. The total cost you have incurred on renovation is 13.2 million. The total cost of the renovation is 13.2 million and has been included in the operating expenses for the current year. Now, do you believe this is an accounting issue? Because the renovation, the expenditure on the renovation, because it has resulted in an increase in the customer number and it has resulted in the revenue increasing. So for that reason, should it be expensed out? No, it should be capitalized. So should we capitalize it? Because the renovation of the car parking facility has increased the number of customers and revenue. So is there a future economic benefit? So has the company done it right? Has the company done it right? No. So is it a wrong accounting treatment that they have expensed out? So do you believe currently, because they have expensed out, so currently the expenses are overstated? They have expensed out, so currently the expenses are overstated and the profit is understated. And more importantly, your assets, your non-current assets are understated, because this should have been capitalized, right? So your non-current assets are understated. Is that true? So many things we need to tell management, right? Just because of this. Now 13.2 million has been recognized as an expense. So we should find the materiality of 13.2 has been recognized as expense. So we should find materiality towards profit. It has been recognized as expense. So how much is 13.2 million as a percentage of profit before tax? Because it has been recognized as an expense, so 90.41%. So that's quite a significant, right? So that means if uh, your profit can increase by $13.2 million if you recognize this as a capital expenditure, right? So currently your profit is understated by $13.2 million, or your profit is understated by 90%. So that's quite a significant misstatement to be reported to management. And they have to be recognized as an asset. So how much is it as the percentage of asset? And it's 2.47% of the asset, right? Because it has to be recognized as an asset there. So let's write this as a final point, and you'll do the rest of the question yourself then. Okay, the final point you're writing from this question. Renovation work. And the first thing you should be telling under the renovation work to management is that 13 is the materiality. The materiality is $13.2 million versus the profit is equal to 91%, and the materiality is 91%, and versus the total assets, the materiality is 2.46%. So hence this $13.2 million is material. Right, then the next thing we should be telling management is the wrong accounting treatment. Wrong accounting treatment to the management. And not just telling the management the wrong accounting treatment, but also telling why. just like the above answer I wrote, right? So you'll not just be telling that the revenue expenditure is a wrong accounting treatment. It should have been capitalized, but why it should have been capitalized? Because there was a future economic benefit. The number of customers have increased, right? So wrong accounting treatment, but also tell why it is wrong to score your mark. 1 mark, 1 mark for materiality, and then you go down and you tell management the adjustment necessary, and you tell management what and what should be adjusted, what should be adjusted and how. So you will tell management what should be adjusted and how. You should be adjusting your expenses, right? And you should be adjusting your assets, and that adjustment will increase your profits. So what should be adjusted and how will give you 1 mark. So renovation work is a wrong accounting treatment, which you should be communicating to the management, and then you're telling the management this is something material, right? So that's the way of doing these questions, right? When your examiner asks you, now look at this question and give me a final feedback. Recommend the matters which should be included in the audit report to those charged with governance. So was everyone clear about matters should be included in the report to those charged with governance? Was the question understandable to all of you? And did you got these matters from the case study? And you read the article, right? The article was giving you examples of 7 matters, and then you need to tell the reason for inclusion. So does this question sounds easier if you have the background of the article, and then you read this case study and you identify the matters, and you get an idea, okay, what matter should be communicated to the management and why, and the marking scheme of one mark for everything you're writing and justifying. Okay, now just to give you an last example, because you might get confused when you do it at home. Look at the last line here. We read till the red line. Now, where I ended the red line, read the line after. It says the audit file includes a working paper recording discussion with management, which confirms that the capital expenditure authorization forms have not been completed for this expenditure. Is this an internal control weakness? Capital expenditure authorization form has not been completed for this expenditure. Is this a deficiency in the internal control system? Should I be communicating deficiency to management as part of my report to those charged with governance? So can you gain marks from here? And now look at the last paragraph, because you will get confused in the last paragraph. You are aware that your firm has intended to replace the current partner, Bryony, with Philip, who is Eddie's other specialist in food retail. Unfortunately, Mr. Campbell was taken ill earlier in the year and will not be available until the next year audit engagement. As a result, 20x9 is the 8th year in which Bryony Robertson has acted as an engagement partner. Do you believe that if the engagement partner is acting for 8th year, this gives rise to a familiarity threat? This gives rise to an ethical issue, right? But what was the reason of this ethical issue? The reason of this ethical issue is that the partner, you were about to replace the partner, and you were replacing Bryony with Philip. But unfortunately, Philip fell ill, and for that reason, in the absence of Philip, Bryony has to work for another year. So you will tell examiner this is a familiarity threat, but you will then also tell examiner that this is permissible, because the partner who had to take on fell ill, and because the partner who had to take on fell ill, automatically this became permissible. So code of conduct says, when there are extraordinary situations, the engagement partner can even work for 9 years. I hope everyone knows the rule 7 years, that the engagement partner should step down after 7 years, should change after 7 years. But if there are extraordinary circumstances, the engagement partner can continue to work for 9 years. So, do you believe there is an extraordinary situation here because Philip fell ill? If you can give me your answers. No, we need to discuss the ethical matters, right, with those charged with governance. We need to inform those charged with governance that because our partner fell ill, so we are taking Bryony for the next year as the 8th year, rather than the management criticizes you and the management asks you, why is Bryony working for 8th year? Is it better to tell management before rather than the management allegates you and tell you that your partner is working for 8 years? So is it better to communicate to the management the ethical issues before rather than the management allegates you and tell you that your partner is working here for 8th year? So which is better, communicating ethical issues before to the management or waiting for the management to communicate you the ethical issues? So if there is an ethical issue, you should be communicating um, it to the management so that the management knows that as an audit firm you know the ethical issues, and as an audit firm you are taking proper safeguards for ethical issues. Now the problem is, rote learn students, you will say that in the article there were only 7 examples and there was no ethical example in this article. And a rote learn student will say, no, how can we include the ethical issues in the report to those charged with governance? Because when we read the article, there was only 7 issues. Now, that is a big problem with rote learn students, that they only stick to things given in the article. The basic purpose of the article was that if there is an issue, you need to communicate the issue to those charged with governance. Now, ethics is also an issue. If your partner fell ill, and for that reason, you need to take on your existing partner for 8th year, that is also an issue. Now, if you think this article is sufficient, the article we just read, this particular article we read, this one, which had the title Auditor Report to Those Charged with Governance. Auditor Report to Those Charged with Governance, and you just read this article and you get examples from this article, and you don't read my second article I recommended you. Did I recommend a second article to be read, Completing the Audit? And you go down and read this article, which I've shared with you in the session, Completing the Audit. And when you read this article, Completing the Audit, when you read this article, Completing the Audit, and you go down, and in this article, you come across a paragraph which says, look at this paragraph in the article, Completing the Audit, which says, at the conclusion of the audit, a meeting will usually be held between the auditor and the management and those charged with governance. So at the end of the audit, there will be a meeting between the management and those charged with governance, sorry, between those charged with governance and the auditor. And in this meeting, you will present the report. And in the report, you are telling many issues to those charged with governance. Now see the examples given in this article. Some of the examples are coming from the previous article, but can you look at this example here, which I've just highlighted? The details of the ethical matters that may need to be clarified with the client. Now you just read one article and you go to the exam hall. In the second article, which was published later, this article is saying that when you communicate matters with those charged with governance and you have a meeting with those charged with governance, apart from the other matters which are given in the previous article, you should also be communicating the ethical matters that may need to be clarified with the client. So do you believe you need to clarify Bryony working for 8th year with management? Do everyone agrees with that? Should we clarify to the management why Bryony is working for 8th year? Because the management can ask me why Bryony is working for 8th year. He should step down after 7 years. So should I make a clarifying statement to the management through my report that why Bryony is working for 8th year? Is everyone getting my point? So will you just be reading the previous article I recommended, or will you also be reading this article, completing the audit, to get a more comprehensive list? The other examples in this article is as same as the previous article, but this example is added, and this example becomes very important. The details of the ethical matters that may be clarified, that may need to be clarified with the client. So now can my list becomes 8 here? Should I write the 8th point in my list? Ethical matters which need to be clarified with client. So that becomes my 8th meta. So 2 articles, right? 2 articles is now giving me the list of 8. So there were some concerns of student that why should we be communicating ethical matters to client? Is everyone clear? Why are we communicating the ethical matters to client? So that we can tell client why Bryony is working for 8th year. Because we know this is a familiarity threat. As a firm, we know this is a familiarity threat, but we are very proactive. We're very proactive to tell you that Bryony is working for 8th year just because the Philip fell ill. So is everyone clear on this last paragraph now? See this for one final time, and I'm exiting from this question. You are aware that your firm had intended to replace the current partner. That was so good, right? Your firm intended to replace the current partner, but unfortunately, the, the replacing partner fell ill, and for that reason, the Bryony had to work for 8th year. So we should be telling this to the management that because of that reason, we are not replacing the partner, and we will be replacing the partner in the next year. For this year, Bryony will continue as the engagement partner. So if there is an ethical issue, you should be informing that to the management so the management knows the auditor is independent and the auditor is safeguarding the independence. So do you believe auditor needs to be independent and needs to be proactive in its independence? Rather than the management allegates your independence, you should be more proactive in your independence. Is everyone clear on this question? 15 marks. And is everyone clear that this is a very fundamental requirement which can come in the question number 2, matters to be communicating to those charged with governance? And is everyone clear on the examples of matters from the articles, marking scheme of this question, and how you should be identifying a matter and telling examiner why the matter should be included in this report to those charged with governance? So will all of you be reading this article, completing the audit, so that you know what sort of activities happen at the completion stage of the audit, this one? And will you be reading the other article which I just shown you on the website of ACCA, which is the auditor report to those charged with governance? So is everyone sound on this? So how has this first session been of the day 3 so far? Have you realized some important things from the day 3 session so far in terms of the question 2? Have you got some insights which you had no idea of before you entered the session today and attended it as a live session today? So I hope you got some clues to prepare better for the second question, and some clues where you can refine your second question, right? So I hope the urgency of reading the article is very important, and taking your notes from the article is very important, and then attempting the past papers, the question twos of the recent exam papers is very important. So I'm wrapping up my June 19 question now. So in the June 19 question, the part B was something where I need to emphasize on. So that's the one I've done. But the part A, which is about the critical appraisal of the report, because I've done it in my previous webinars, and you can go and watch the recordings of my previous webinar, I've already given you the links. So you can see how to do the critical appraisal and how to identify the marking scheme of a critical appraisal, right? So June 19, question number 2 is now done and is now complete. Right now, I'm going off to a break. Post break, after 15 minutes, I'll resume back with two more questions, which is from September 18 exams and December 18 exams. And we'll see what's new in those questions, which needs to be polished and refined. And post break, even, I'll make you realize the importance of articles. And if you know the articles, you can be so well prepared for your exams coming up in December. So just before I go off break, I'll be looking forward to your feedback of the first 90 minutes. So I know what have you gained from the first 90 minutes of the session. And we're going off to a break now, and we'll be resuming back in 15 minutes. So that's approximately 7:50 p.m. Pakistan Standard Time. The session would start in, and into the last part of the session, then I'll be working on the two other questions. So how has been the session so far? Just quickly drop in your comments and suggestions. And if any of your questions during the live webinar has been left unattended, you still have an opportunity of dropping these questions to the WhatsApp group. I hope all of you are on the WhatsApp groups and you can communicate with me over the WhatsApp group, and I can better respond to your questions on the WhatsApp group, right? So there is an opportunity for you even after this webinar gets to an end. And this WhatsApp group have been made for your facilitation so that your answers could be responded in a more effective manner, because that's not possible within the live session. So uh, I'm going off to a break and see you back after the break, resuming question 2 from September 18 and December 18 exams. Keep dropping your feedback throughout the break, and I'll be responding to your questions after the session ends today. Okay, off to a break and be back in 15 minutes. Okay, welcome back after the break. We were discussing the second question from the AAA exams, which focus on the completion and reporting stage. And that's what I will be continuing further in the remaining time of the webinar today. Now, so far, so forth, we have drill down many aspects of the second question. And from these three questions, I have done the June 19. And over the last 90 minutes or so, the focus had been on the importance and the urgency of reading the articles. So let's go down with the further analysis now of the question 2 and the untouched areas. Now, just before I proceed to my next question, I just want to make you realize with one very important thing here, which is when you look at this article, completing the audit, I'm recommending you some sections of this article, which I would prefer that all of you read very carefully, right? When you go down this article, look at this first section, review of the audit files and evaluation of misstatement. This is such an important area which is examinable in AAA because we know there's a question which comes on review of audit file and the evidence you should expect to find. And that is a question which I've done in my previous webinar, but this is an area which you should be reading from the article, that what exactly happens when the manager reviews the file, or what is basically the evaluation of misstatement. There is another article which itself has a title, evaluation of misstatement, right? So if you read this section, that's good. Then you go down, leave aside the final analytical procedures, subsequent events and going concern. We know questions comes on going concern, and examiner's favorite area, going concern. An examiner has put a lot of questions in the past paper on going concern. So just to realize the importance of subsequent events and going concern at the completion stage of the audit, because the auditor do evaluate the events after the balance sheet date, or to evaluate the going concern at the finalization stage of the audit. So going through the subsequent events and reading the mind of your examiner about subsequent events and what the examiner expects from you in terms of subsequent events and going concern procedure can be very crucial. So will you be developing your mindset from this article about subsequent events and the examiner expectations about subsequent events? If I can get your answers quickly. And about the going concern? So will you be drilling this paragraph, subsequent events and going concern procedures, and knowing what your examiner expects from you? See, it is very important that we should read the mind of the examiner. If you're not reading the mind of the examiner, we are far away from success. And I hope over the 2 days and now being the third day, I'm trying to make you realize that it is so very important that you read the mind of your examiner. And the only way you can read the mind of your examiner is to read the examining team articles. And if you read the examining team articles, you can know what your examiner is expecting or can give you in the exam paper. So this is another paragraph. Read through this. Written representation, such an important area. A lot of times students write written representations in exam paper, but you should know the fundamentals of written representation. You should know when the auditor takes written representation, in what situations the auditor take written representation, so you can explore this area. There can be questions in later exam settings where the examiner can ask you some knowledge about written representation, so you should know that as well, right? And finally, this one, audit clearance meeting, which was like a report to those charged with governance. And we're just reading it prior to the break, that what sort of issues you should be communicating to those charged with governance. So you should have a fair idea from this article. So a very important article and a must to read article. So I hope you get the realization of that. Okay, now moving towards the practice questions. The next one is from the December 18 exams. December 18 exams. Let's see, December 18, question number 2. What is the unusual part? which needs to be drilled in the live session today. Now, when you look at this question 2 of the December 18 exams, this question number 2 is full of numbers, full of the balance sheet and the income statement. See, so far only numbers. And you go down, there are some note numbers coming. You know the examiner gives you the financial statement and the notes to the financial statements, right? And then comes the requirement. This is the question 2, right? The first requirement, 10 marks. Using analytical review where appropriate. So where appropriate, evaluate the matters which may cast doubt on Delhi company ability to continue as going concern. So you need to evaluate the matters which may cast doubt on the Delhi company ability to continue as a going concern. So over here, the focus is on the matters which cast doubt on Delhi company ability to continue as going concern. And you can use the analytical procedures as a matter because there might be some ratios which may cast doubt on the going concern status. There might be a ratio that the company's current ratio is going down. We know a lot of ratios can demonstrate the going concern status of the company. So examiner is saying using analytical review where appropriate, not every time, but where appropriate. Evaluate the matters which may cast doubt. 10 marks, and I'll need to give you the marking scheme of that. Then in the second part, the B part, see, this is a question I have been drilling in my previous webinars, and I'll not be touching upon this again this time because it has been done in my previous webinars. Explain the evidence in respect of the cash flow forecast, which you would expect to find in your review of the audit working paper. What evidence will you expect to find in the file? See, the question says you would expect to find in your review of the audit working paper. So what evidence will you expect to find in the review of the working paper in respect of the cash flow forecast? Such questions have been drilled so many times in my previous webinars on evidence. And from your review of the file, what evidence you expect to find? And you are just reading this article right over here. See this heading. Realize the importance of this heading now from the article. Review of the audit files. Now the question is asking what evidence will you expect to find in respect of the cash flow forecast when you are reviewing the files. Now, how you write evidence, what's the marking scheme of evidence? This has been an area which has gone through in the previous webinars and I'll not be touching upon them. So you want to know how much you will write, how will you write, what you should write. If you have all those questions popping up in your mind, then you have to refer to the previous webinars, right? Which the link has been included in my presentation. But review of the audit file becomes very important. Now, just a realization, this article, which I just made you realize here, see this article in front of your screen, examining evidence. Examining evidence. If you click this article, it will tell you so much about evidence. Though it's a very old article, but so many times the student have confusion. What is the difference between a procedure and an evidence? Because in P7, AAA, you also get to write procedures. You also get to write evidence. So many times the student keeps asking, what is the difference between a procedure and evidence? Though I have made it clear so many times in my previous webinar. But is there something written by the examiner in black and white? This article? If you explore this article on evidence, it is also giving you a difference between a procedure and an evidence. Can this make your life easier as a student? And you go down this article. It also tests you. It also tests you which of the following are procedures and which are evidence. It's also giving you a question that the examiner wants to test you that from which of the following is a procedure and which of the following are the evidence. And then the answer is given down. So then comes an important heading, identifying appropriate audit evidence. Now, when you are writing evidence in the working paper file and you are a manager and you are reviewing the working paper file and you want to write an answer in the exam paper about the evidence, identifying the appropriate audit evidence. Now, if you read through this article, you will have a mindset. That mindset will help you in answering this question for 9 marks. Explain the audit evidence in respect of the cash flow forecast, which you would expect to find in the review of the file. So, audit evidence in respect of the cash flow forecast. So, will you be reading the articles on evidence? Will you be reading the article on completing the audit? And will both these articles help you to write an answer for 9 marks and my previous webinar? So I hope you start to realize that whatever the examiner asks you is not out of the articles, is within the articles. But if you go to the exam hall with less articles prepared, with no articles prepared, obviously you will come out of the exam hall saying it was a very tough paper. It was a very difficult paper. It was a very challenging paper. Remember, no paper is difficult, provided you have prepared yourself very, very properly. Okay, then the last part of this question, C. Explain the possible reasons why directors may wish to exclude the disclosures and evaluate the possible implication for the audit report. See, in the 25 marks question, 10 marks was on going concern, no reporting. 9 marks was on evidence, no reporting. And you go to the exam hall saying question 2 is a reporting question. Question 2 is a completion and reporting question. Out of the 25 marks, 19 marks have been allocated on completion. 6 marks is coming on the report. Explain the possible reasons why director may wish to exclude the disclosure. Why will the director exclude the disclosure? And evaluate the possible implication for the audit report. If the director is not giving a disclosure, what is the implication for that on the report? Now we get a typical reporting question, implication for the audit report. So imagine, is the whole 25 marks on reporting? We just did the previous question as well. So will you change the mindset that the whole 25 marks comes on reporting? No. Out of the 25 marks, certain marks are allocated to the completion stage and certain marks are allocated to the reporting stage. Is that clear with every one of you? Okay, now let's drill in the answer. There are 3 parts. I'm only doing 2 of them. The evidence part you will do yourself, but let's have a proper realistic plan of the answer. Okay, this is December 18. So let me start on this from a fresh page where we can drill in the answer. Okay, December 18, question number 2. Now for 25 marks. Now, when you look at the requirements of this 25 marks, the first requirement A is about the going concern indicators. The examiner was asking us to identify the methods which may cast doubt on the going concern. Matters which may cast doubt on the going concern. And we know whenever the examiner asks you the going concern matters, each going concern matter is worth 2 marks. Each going concern matter is worth 2 marks. So that's the marking scheme for going concern matters, right, in exam paper. Then the next requirement of this question was B, evidence. Evidence in working paper file with regards to cash flow forecast. What evidence we will have in the working paper file with regards to the cash flow forecast? This was a 9 marks question, and we know the marking scheme for evidence is 1 mark per evidence. So 1 mark per evidence is the marking scheme. So the second question was on evidence with the marking scheme. And then in the third part, the question was asking us why management why management is reluctant to give a disclosure. Why management is reluctant to give a disclosure and the implication for the audit report. And this question was worth 5 marks. So reluctance, for every reluctance of management you write, you will get 1 mark per reluctance. And for every implication you write, for every implication on audit report, you will get 1 mark. So that's the marking scheme for the last requirement. So is the structure ready? Now, I hope you realize the importance of planning, and we had 25 marks. So we have approximately 48 minutes in the exam hall to do a 25 marks question. And 1/4 of the time should be spent on reading and planning. I hope you remember the rule of 1.95 and you follow the rule of 1.95. Now, this is the planning I've just did. So we know the requirements, we know the marking schemes. Now, the only thing left is to answer. Okay, let's make an answer sketch. I'm writing the word sketch because a lot of times the student thinks this is the complete answer. So I need to emphasize this is a sketch answer. Sketch means I'm just trying to give you a mindset, and then you can write the answer once the session ends in a very proper way, in like a paragraph form. Okay, let's start on with the sketched answer. We first need to identify the going concern metrics, right? Using the analytical procedures where appropriate. Okay, now just before I look at the financial statements, I'm looking at the note numbers. Let's see if we can identify a going concern matter from the notes. The first note says Delhi company has undergone a period of rapid expansion in recent years, and it is intending to buy a new warehouse in January 20X9 at a cost of 4.3 million. So that's good. That's quite optimistic. Nothing of an issue. The company wants to buy a new warehouse in January 20X9 because of a rapid expansion. The rapid expansion is an optimistic situation and sounds good. In order to finance the new warehousing facility, the company is in the process of negotiating the new finance from its banker. The application of $5 million the loan application is for $5 million and the loan is to be repaid over a period of 4 years. Now, there is a risk here that the company is in the process of negotiating a new finance and they need the new finance to buy the new warehousing facility. What if they fail to get the new finance? If they fail to get the new finance, this will impact the buying of the new warehouse and that could cause them the problems. So the company is in the process of negotiating a loan and we need to be skeptical here of the chances they might be getting a loan. There might be something in the case study which we need to explore about the chances of getting the loan success or not. But I'm taking this as my first skeptical point here when I'm writing upon the methods for the going concern. My first meta could be the loan application and what if it fails. I'm just thinking about it. Loan application and what if it's fail? Will it have any impact on the company? Will it dent the company's plan to buy the new warehouse? What if it fails? Right? This is not a question on risk, right? This is a question on going concern, right? So don't think about the loan application and the risk of management bias in manipulating results. This is a question on going concern. So if the loan application fails, the company might not be getting the new warehouse. If they're not getting the new warehouse, that might impact their future prospects. If the future prospects are dented, the company might be having some doubts on the going concern. Okay, next. Number three, the provision of $3.5 million in the year's statement of financial position relates to legal actions from five of Delhi largest customers. Five of the Delhi largest customer has filed a case against the company. Legal action from five of Delhi company's largest customer. The action relates to the claim that the company has sold cars which did not comply with domestic regulation. Failure to follow the domestic regulation. The company could be penalized. The company could be penalized by the regulator. So there are two issues here. One, they are facing a legal action from the five customers. Which five customers? The five largest customers. And the second problem is um, a claim that there have been a non-compliance with the domestic regulations. So the largest customer filing the claim, and then there is a non-compliance with domestic regulations. Both of them becomes issue. Legal claim from five largest customers. Now, if there is a legal claim from the five largest customers, that means the customers are dissatisfied. The customers are dissatisfied might result in losing customers and a future fall in revenue. There might be a future fall of revenue. So no company would like the customer to be dissatisfied, because if the customers are dissatisfied, that is a very serious problem, because the loyalty of the customer or the retention of the customer is very important. So if there is a chance of losing customer, then that could be something very, very important. Then another thing, non-compliance with laws, non-compliance with domestic regulations. When there is a non-compliance with domestic regulation, the company can face fines, penalties. And we know if the company faces fines and penalties, it could affect the reputation of the company. It could affect the reputation of the company, the market image of the company, which can affect the going concern of the company as well. The market image, the people would not like to buy cars from this company. So we have a first point, loan application and what if it fails. We have a legal claim coming from the five largest customer, which is another matter of concern. Then a non-compliance with domestic regulations, right? No, this is a going concern question, right? We're not determining the materialities in the going concern question. So 3 points. We need to make 5 points to get to a 10 marks answer, right? 2 marks per valid point. Just one more and you will do the rest yourself. A major new competitor has moved into Dali company's market. A major new competitor has moved into the market, in the Dali's market. That sets an emergence of a successful competitor or emergence of a competitor. A new competitor has moved into the market. So another issue, uh, a new competitor, and there is a risk. There is a risk on losing the market share in future and might cause doubts on going concern. So I've got 4 points. You need to make a list of five. Continue making a list to five, but every point you write needs to be explained in a paragraph, explained in a reasonable paragraph, justifying why each of the point will impact, why each of the point will raise doubts on the going concern status, Why each of the point will raise doubts on the going concern status. If the loan application fail, how will it bring a doubt on the going concern status? If there is a legal claim, how will this bring a doubt on the going concern status? And the list continues, right? So see, I found some points from the narratives. the narratives given by the examiner. Then you can also find the points from the numbers. See, there is another going concern problem facing this business. Now I'm coming to the analytical procedures, right? See, there is a big problem. The company has become loss making. Last year, the company had a profit. This year, the company has become loss making. And that's a big problem for this company. The company has become loss making. Now, from where have I identified this point? From the income statement. The company is loss making. That's another issue. The company is loss making. Last year, they had a profit. Last year, they had a profit. So that's another concern factor. Now you can do some ratio analysis. For example, we know for going concern, liquidity is very important, right? So we can find the liquidity of this company, like as in we have the current assets. See, we have the current assets given, current asset of the current year and the current asset of the last year. We have the current assets here, current assets for the last year and current assets for this year, right? And we have the current liabilities given under. We have the current liabilities given under. So you can find, once the session ends, you can find the current ratio, right? You can calculate the current ratio. You can calculate the current ratio. I think if you calculate the current ratio, there will be a fall in current ratio, which you can calculate after. The fall in the current ratio from the last year to this year. It was like, I think it was like 2.38 last year. And this year it's 1.58. So even though 1.58 is a good current ratio, but see, there is a drastic fall in your ability to pay. Is that a concern factor? Even though 1.58 is a good current ratio, but when you compare that with the last year, 2.38, there has been a drastic fall in your ability to pay. So is that a concern factor? Everyone realize the importance? Even though 1.58 is a very good current ratio, right? 1.58 is an ideal current ratio, but do you see the falling from the last year? And do you realize that this is important for the company to address? So see, the examiner was saying utilize the analytical procedure where possible. So I did utilize the analytical procedure, right? I calculated the current ratio, and I linked my current ratio with the going concern doubts. So it's not like alone analytical procedures. You need to utilize the analytical procedure. You need to involve the analytical procedure in your point making. So I not just calculated the ratio, but I involved the current ratio as my meta to gain my 2 marks, right? So I hope you can continue with the rest of the answer. I've given you a clue, and I have given you the articles recommended, which you should be reading. So is everyone sound on going concern? Will you be reading the articles, and will you be exploring the answer of this question? Because GC is an important area, right? If you want to practice more questions on going concern, if I can just give you a clue here, if you want to be good on going concern, so what you can do these 3 questions. Number 1, December 13. Question number 5, you can do December 15. Question number 2A. And you can do this one, the one we are doing, December 18, question number 2. So these are 3 good questions on going concern. If you can do them all, you will be so very well prepared for taking on going concern in exam paper. And you will be amazed that there is so much similarity in these 3 questions. If you do December 13, you will think that examiner has taken a lot of things from December 13 into December 15. If you do 13 and 15, you will see examiner has taken so much things from both these questions to 18. So you need to do practice on going concern. And I've given you the questions in front of your screen, which you should be taking as practice questions for going concern and improving your prospects. If this topic comes in December 19, you can be taking on this as a much better prepared topic. right? So that's one part of it, right? Okay, next. I'm not doing the part on evidence. You need to see my previous webinars for evidence for that. But why management is reluctant to give a disclosure of going concern, and what's the implication for the audit report? Let's test you for that. Reluctance. Why? Why management is reluctant, and what can be the implication of this reluctance on the audit report? Impact on audit report. There are so many going concern problems, right, facing this company, and we know the ISA 570, which deals with going concern, uh, and the IAS1 do emphasize on the need of a disclosure when there are some material uncertainties relating to going concern. And this company have some material uncertainties relating to going concern being loss making, and some of their important customers have left. They're facing a legal case, and a new competitor has moved in. So there are some material uncertainties, right? And we know the IS1 requires the material uncertainty to be disclosed in the notes to the financial statement. Look at this point number 6 here. It says, the point number 6, the financial statements have been prepared on a going concern basis. That's fine. And make no reference to any significant uncertainties in relation to going concern. There are so many significant uncertainties relating to the going concern which should have been disclosed. So the company is a going concern, right? However, there are some significant uncertainties, and the management should have disclosed these significant uncertainties in the notes, but they're reluctant. They're not giving these significant uncertainties in the note. And you come to the B part. You have established through discussions with Dali company's director that they do not wish to disclose uncertainties over the going concern status in the notes to the financial statement. So the management is not giving disclosures of the going concern uncertainties, which is the requirement of IES1, and the shareholder should know about these. But the management is reluctant. They're not giving these disclosures. Why? Why are they reluctant? What can be the reason? Because the, because of the self-interest of the directors. Do you know directors are paid bonuses on the basis of company's performance? And do you believe directors have a self-interest? If they disclose these significant uncertainties, will the shareholders be happy with them? Do you all agree with my statement? If I can get your answers. Do you believe there is a self-interest of the directors? And that is very important, because if they disclose it, the uncertainties, will they be getting the bonuses? Will the shareholders be happy? Right? So the first reluctance is the self-interest of the directors. And the second is, if they disclose these uncertainties, this might even impact on the loan negotiations. What if the bank, we know when you negotiate a loan with the bank, you also need to give the audited report to the bank. So will it impact on the loan negotiation? So directors have a self-interest, right? So if the director gives a disclosure, they will not be getting the bonuses, and impact on the loan negotiations. Do you believe that? Because when you sit down with the bank, you need to give audited financial statement to the bank, and then only the bank will give you a loan. So if the bank gets to know that the company is facing some going concern problems, will the bank be hesitant to give you a loan? True. If I can get your answers, will bank be hesitant of giving you a loan if you make this disclosure? So reluctant. So there are some logical reasons, right, why the management is reluctant to give a disclosure. But do you believe this disclosure is a requirement of the accounting standards? Impact on the report. When you're writing the impact on the report, the first thing you're telling is that this is required by the accounting standards. This is required by the accounting standards. That a disclosure of material uncertainty is given. Disclosure of material uncertainty. Disclosure of material uncertainty relating to going concern is given. So the standards require, right, that you give a disclosure of material uncertainties relating to going concern, but the management is not giving it. So obviously, is that a breach of the accounting standards? So when there is a breach of an accounting standard, the auditor has to give a modified opinion. True, but now there is a problem. Will the auditor be giving a qualified opinion or an adverse opinion? Which one of them? This is a breach of a standard, right? Management is not giving a disclosure. This is a breach of a standard. So ideally, I need to think about a modified opinion. Will I be giving a qualified opinion or an adverse opinion? Now, the reason is I've covered this in my previous webinar as well, that because the matter relates with going concern, and going concern is such an important matter, and going concern is the basis of preparing the financial statement. That is the reason you have to give an adverse opinion. If the going concern disclosure is not given, you can remember this note. If GC disclosure relating to material uncertainty is not given is equal to an adverse opinion, because that is such an important reason. Going concern is the basis of preparing the financial statement. And let's test you. If the disclosure is not given, but what if GC disclosure is given, then what will happen? If GC disclosure relating to material uncertainty is given, then what will happen? You have exams on the 2nd of December. If the going concern disclosures relating to material uncertainty is given, then what happens in the new audit report? What will happen in the new report when there is a disclosure of material uncertainty given? Yes, the auditor will highlight this paragraph, in a paragraph known as MURGC para. Do you know the new audit report has an MURGC paragraph, which comes after the basis of opinion paragraph? All of you have exams on the 2nd of December, right? After the basis of opinion, there is a paragraph known as MURGC, material uncertainty relating to going concern. So if the disclosure is given of the going concern, then the auditor will highlight this in the MURGC paragraph. And if the disclosure has not been given, then you give an adverse opinion. So that's just like a revision of your going concern reporting, right? So please revise your rules of reporting. A lot of students were giving me wrong answers. So please ensure there is a need to revise the structure of the report, and need to revise that when the disclosure is given of going concern, what will happen, and when the disclosure is not given, what will happen. So you should be having a sound idea on going concern, because this is such an important area of the AAA exams. Right, is everyone sound on this question? The rest you need to do yourself. I just need to take on the last of the 3 questions now. September 18, just to see what was in that question. Now, September 18 was the start from where the format of the paper changed, and was the very first exam setting, which had the new format, which had 3 questions, and the student had to attempt all the 3 questions in the exam paper. And that is the very first time this question number 2 was set in with regards to completion and reporting stage. Let's see what's inside the question 2 of the September 18 exams. Okay, now right in front of your screen is the September 18 question. Right, this is September 18, question number 2. Now, this is a question which I have done so many times in my previous webinar, because this is a typical question which comes on reporting, where the examiner gives you some misstatements and you need to evaluate the misstatements. And now that is the reason this question becomes so important. Can you see a schedule of the misstatements given here? And you must have seen this schedule of misstatement many times in the past paper. There are a lot of questions which comes with this schedule of misstatement when the examiner gives you a reporting question. There are some misstatements and you need to discuss these misstatements with management. There are some misstatements relating to lease of testing equipment. There are some misstatements relating to legal claim, and there is a misstatement relating to asset impairment. Why this is a misstatement? The examiner has given you a commentary below. The commentary of the misstatement has been given below, and see what is the examiner asking you in terms of the misstatement. I've done this question in my previous webinar, which was September 19. So please have a look at the answer. It says, recommend and explain the matters which should be discussed with management in relation to each of the proposed adjustment. So what matters will you be discussing with management in relation to each of the proposed misstatement? We have 3 proposed misstatements, right? And the examiner is asking us the matters which you should be discussing with management in relation to each of the proposed misstatements, including an assessment of their individual impact on financial statement, including an assessment of their individual impact on financial statement and on the audit opinion if the management does not make the adjustment. Now be very critical. A lot of times student reads the question wrongly. This question is asking you the matters which you should be discussing with management in relation to each of the proposed adjustment, including the assessment of their impact on the financial statement, which normally students overlook, and the impact on the audit opinion. Is the examiner asking us to write 2 impacts, the impact on the financial statement and the impact on the audit opinion? And you come out of the exam hall by just writing the impact on the opinion, not writing the impact on the financial statement. Will you be scoring marks? No. Let's break this question and understand this question. When you look at this question from the September 18 exams, even though I've drilled that down in my last webinar, just want to make a structure ready and you'll do the rest yourself. September 2018, question number 2, and you look at the requirement. The requirement is broken down. Number 1, the requirement asks you the matters you should be discussing with management in relation to each of the proposed adjustment, then its impact on the financial statements and the impact on the audit opinion. Let's understand the question. 3 things within a jumbled question. Matters you should be discussing with management with regards to each of the proposed adjustment. Now, just to give you a sketched answer, whenever there is a proposed adjustment in exam and you want to discuss matters with regards to proposed adjustment with management, the very first matter you need to think about and discuss with management with regards to the proposed adjustment is materiality. Is it material or not? And you get 1 mark. The second matter you should be discussing with the management is the accounting treatment. You are telling management the right accounting treatment. You're telling management what should be the right treatment. You're discussing the treatment with management, 1 mark. Then you're also telling the management that there is a need of adjustment. Else, there is a need of adjustment. You're discussing with the management that because the matter is material, for example, and the accounting treatment you adopted is wrong, there is a need for adjustment. So you emphasize, right? You emphasize on the need for adjustment and you take 1 mark. Now, what's the impact on the financial statement? The impact on the financial statement is because there is a proposed adjustment which is not reflected in the financial statements. I hope you all agree with this. Because there is a proposed adjustment which is not reflected in the financial statement. So do you believe the impact on the financial statement is that something must be understated and something must be overstated? Is that true? Because management has not recognized something, and that's the reason you're writing a proposed adjustment. So do you believe for the reason of the proposed adjustment, something must be under and overstated in the financial statement, and that's basically the impact on the financial statements? So telling examiner the uh, impact on the financial statement, what is understated and what is overstated. And lastly, what's the impact on the opinion? Is it material? Is it immaterial? Or is it pervasive? Now we know if it is material, the auditor will issue a qualified opinion. If it is immaterial, the auditor will issue an unqualified opinion. We're talking about each misstatements. And is it pervasive? Then obviously the auditor has to issue an adverse opinion. I've covered the rules of adverse and pervasive and material in my previous webinar, so please go through that. But the examiner is asking us the impact on the audit opinion. What will be the impact on the audit opinion? So you need to read the case and you need to think about the impact. It has to be one of them, either unqualified, either adverse, either qualified. So what are you discussing with management? You're discussing with management the materiality, you're discussing with management the right accounting treatment, and you're also discussing with management the need to adjust. You're telling management because this is a misstatement, you should adjust it. So you're also discussing the need of an adjustment. You're emphasizing on management that you should adjust this. So that is very important. Otherwise, the management will not. So your justification of adjustment is very important and your reinforcement of adjustment is very important. So is everyone clear with the breakdown of what the examiner is asking? Matters you should be discussing with management in relation to each of the proposed misstatement, impact on the financial statement, and the impact on the audit opinion. So is everyone clear with the requirement structure? And I've covered this question in my previous webinar, so you need to drill this question out. Right, I've done this entire question, September 18 question 2 in my previous webinar, right? So please have a look at the answer. I've covered the issues in a more detail, but just want to make you realize the structure of this question, right? Just in my previous webinar, right? September 19, and I've given the link of that on my presentation slides even. Then when you look at this September 18 question, in terms of the second part, right, 15 marks have been allocated, sorry, not 15, 17 marks have been allocated to the first requirement. And then when you look at the second requirement, C, comment on the ethical and professional issues. And I was just mentioning that at the start of the session that even in the question 2, which is a completion and a reporting stage question, you can get a question on ethical and professional issues. And you got it this time. We didn't had that in June 19. We didn't had that in December 18, but we had that in September 18. So we have done ethical and professional issues in the previous webinar. You need to scroll, you need to go through my previous webinars to know how to write them. Right, so are you all realizing the importance and the depth of the question too? I just need to have a Q&A session with you for 5 minutes. If you can just be on your chat box and respond to me as quickly as possible. And my first question, have you all realized the importance of the question two? And have you also realized the depth of the question two? Have you realized the depth of the question two? And is it now tell me, is it just a reporting question? Is it just a reporting question? Okay, and has this encouraged you? Has this encouraged you to practice all the previous question number two when you go to the exam hall for December? Will you practice all the question twos? Just three of them, right? But even if you are attempting the previous questions, even if you're attempting the previous questions, will you be attempting the previous questions? I think this topic used to come in the question five of the previous paper. So you can do the previous question five to be prepared on this topic. So I hope you take a holistic view of question two, not a incomplete view of the question two and enter the exam hall, because a lot of time the student only have a mindset that question number two is only a reporting question, and when they enter the exam hall and they get something other than reporting, they are in a state of stress, they are in a state of shock, and then they think that we are unsuccessful. So I hope with a proper preparation, you can be good onto the question two. So I'm not just touching on the areas which have gone in the previous webinar, just emphasizing on the areas which have been through. Now you've seen this question in front of your screen, which is evaluation of misstatement. And this is the misstatements, and you need to evaluate these misstatements. And the examiner was saying matters you should be discussing for each misstatements. Now, there is a complete article of the examiner, which is on evaluation of misstatement. If I can just show you that article and realize you the importance of this article. See this article and see the exam question, September 18. In September 18, there were misstatements, three of them, and you were evaluating the three misstatements, right? And examiner was asking us the matters you should be communicating with management with regards to each of the misstatement, including its impact on the financial statement. Now, I will make you realize in the next 5 to 6 minutes that how important is this article, evaluation of misstatement, because in the question number two, you need to evaluate the misstatements, and a couple of times the questions have come on evaluation of misstatements, right? So let's see the crucial part of this question. The very first paragraph of this question article says the completion stage. I'm reading the first para, just be focused. It says the completion stage of the audit is when the auditor reviews the work performed and consider the implication for the audit report. A crucial part of this review is the evaluation of misstatements identified during audit. So the examiner is saying the completion stage of the audit is all about the review and the implication for the audit report. And that's what I've been emphasizing since the start of the session. But the examiner says a crucial part of this review is the evaluation of misstatement found during audit. So in the September 18 paper, we found three misstatements, and the examiner was asking us to evaluate these misstatements. Now, then the examiner tells you the ISA 450, which is basically the ISA which deals with evaluation of misstatements. You can scroll down and read the ISA 450, so you have knowledge of ISA 450. And then it tells you some of the misstatements, examples of misstatements. A misstatement occurs and the examiner has given you so many examples of misstatements. So misstatement is not just a debit and credit, right? See, the examiner is saying when something is classified incorrectly, that is also a misstatement. When something is presented inappropriately, that is also a misstatement. When something, when incorrect amount has been recognized, is also a misstatement. So when a disclosure is not given, that is also a misstatement. So there are so many types of misstatements, right? Disclosures, presentations, classification, and an incorrect amount. So you need to realize that. Then comes an important part: specific requirements of ISA 450. When you are evaluating the misstatement, what are specific requirements? You need to read this paragraph very carefully at home. Specific requirements relating to the specific requirements. So if you go through this paragraph, you will realize that examiner tells you the way you should be evaluating the misstatement, and then you will get a very real track answer for September 18. That when you are communicating matters with management, what matters you communicate with management? If you read through this paragraph, right, uh, ahead, see, examiner is saying the auditor shall communicate on a timely basis all misstatements, and then the examiner keeps writing the other things about the misstatements which you need to explore upon. Keep going through this article. Then examiner is also telling us how you ask management to correct them. See, we were even discussing with the management in the September 18 paper that there is a need to correct them. Not just telling the management this is a misstatement, but also telling the management there is a need to correct it. And then evaluating the effect of that on the audit report. If the management fails to correct it, then what's the effect? So if you can just go through this article and make your notes, see the last heading, that was exactly what the examiner was asking us in the September 18 paper. Identify and explain the matters which should be communicated to those charged with governance with respect to the proposed adjustments. So my conclusion, since my previous 3 days, including this one being the third day, that each and every heading of the article is so very important. If you read articles, you make habit of reading articles, and you explore articles, and you make notes, you can tackle every question in AAA. I hope you start to realize the importance of these articles and how they connect with the exam paper. And multiple times today, yesterday, and day before yesterday, I have made you realizing the same point, that how important is to connect articles with the requirements. Right now, just one final thing. When you're preparing yourself for the second question of the exam paper, when you're preparing yourself for the question two of the exam paper, what exactly is there in your mindset? First of all, the to read articles, need to read articles, recommend it, uh, practice all question twos, read and plan carefully, read and plan carefully, allocate marks effectively, know the marking scheme, know the marking scheme, and then write a proper answer. Write a proper answer. So this is all what we've done through the session today. I've made you realize the need to read articles today. I practiced question twos with you, and you have to continue that. I allocated the reading and planning time very carefully, 1/4 of the time. should be spent on reading and planning. And you know that every mark is 1 minute and 95 seconds. Allocate marks effectively. I did mention the marking scheme across, and write a proper answer. 3/4 time you have is to write the answer. You cannot complain about time management if you follow this rule. A lot of time the student complains about time management. I believe you are not following a proper mechanism of reading and planning and writing. If you follow this 1/4, 3/4 mechanism, you can be so very effective in the reading and planning time, and there should not be an issue of not completing the 100 marks paper. Yes, you can leave, you can be left with 2 to 4 marks, or you can be left with 5 to 6 marks. That's fine. But if you're leaving like 20, 30 marks in the paper, then there is a real serious issue with you. So that's with question 2. Now, what ideal questions can you practice from this? Ideal questions to practice. Now, 3 of them has been in the session today, right? You can practice September 18, question 2, December 18, question 2, and you can practice June 19, question 2. Now, we know before September 18, there was no question 2. Question 2 came in from September 18 with the new format. But if you go prior to that, then you have to practice the June 18, question 5. You have to practice December 17, question 5. And you have to practice June 17, question 5. Sufficient. If you practice these 6, you will have a wonderful uh, picture of completion and reporting stage. So I hope you will go through these 6 questions and prepare yourself effectively for completion and reporting stage. And you will watch my previous webinars as well, so that you know how to do a question on reporting, right? So just one last emphasize here. Uh, I have recommended my previous webinars to you, right? If you can see that in front of your screen for review of the working papers. So you can watch my previous webinars for evidence. The hyperlinks have been given. You can explore these hyperlinks. Ethical and professional issues, the hyperlinks have been given. You can explore these hyperlinks. And reporting, questions on reporting, which I've done in the previous webinar, hyperlinks have been given, right? So all the typical requirements on reporting have been done in my previous webinars, right? So let's wrap up the third day, sorry. Let's wrap up the question 2 on the third day. So, and let's plan the question 3 tomorrow. I will be meeting you tomorrow for the third question, question 3, which is a surprise package in in the AAA paper. Question 3 is the most open question. Anything can come in question 3, and tomorrow you will realize the importance of question 3. Tomorrow you will realize the holistic view of question 3. You will realize the importance of reading so many articles for question 3 tomorrow, because question 3 is the most suspense question in the triple exams. It's the most surprise question in the triple exam. But we need to see some clues tomorrow for a better definition of the question 3. But I hope you had a productive learning today for the second question. And I'll be looking forward to your feedback within these last 5 minutes. If you can keep posting your feedbacks about the question, about the session today, and your overall learnings from the question 2 today in terms of the day 3. So keep putting your feedback. Now, just one important reminder to all of you. We know there is a current issue which is very important for December 19 exams, and I'll be drilling the current issue, which is about data analytics, and very deeply on the last day of the webinar, which is on Friday, the day 5. And you will be amazed to have insights of the data analytics and the way you should be preparing data analytics for your exam sittings in December 19, because that's an untouched article yet, and there is a chance that the examiner might touch upon the article on data analytics. I will recommend you one thing, that because every day and every hour for all of you is very important. So if you just go to the website where the articles are kept in, and you just download this article prior to Friday and read it, would be very good. See this article here, data analytics and the auditor. This is an unexplored article, right? And this is an article which is potential for December 19 exams, and you cannot just go in exam hall without reading this article on data analytics. So please have a reading of this prior to Friday, day 5, where I'll do this. Tomorrow is the day 4, and I'm drilling the question 3 tomorrow, which is such an important question, right? So I hope all of you uh, are now preparing yourself for question 1 and question 2. You have plenty of time. 2nd of December you have your exam paper. That means realistically you have ample time still, that you sit down to study. You can do wonder on 2nd of December. But have a right strategy, right? And anything left unattended in terms of your questions, please put them on the WhatsApp group, and I try to answer a sample of those questions which I consider important for the rest of the students as well, right? Now, tomorrow on day 3, when I'll be meeting you, because I need to, day 4, sorry, when I'll be meeting you tomorrow, I just want to realize some important things so you can come prepared for the session tomorrow for day 4. Um, there are some recommended articles for tomorrow. If you can explore them down, you can see them on your screen now. Performance information in the public sector and forensic accounting are the 2 recommended articles for tomorrow. If you can explore them down and better prepared for the session tomorrow, right? And I'll be doing 3 question trees with you tomorrow, March, June 19, December 18, and September 18, right? And there are a lot of questions coming from students since the day 1, asking about the important topics for December 19 exams. I think it's time we should say goodbye to the question spotting the questions, and it's time we prepare everything, right? Because in the last few exam sittings, examiner has been so unexpected that we cannot just be selective. If you're preparing your risk, prepare all the risk: business risk, risk of material misstatement, and audit risk. Don't just go prepared with one risk in exam paper. You have no idea what the examiner can do. So things have become very unexpected, right? In the last 1.5 year, there are 4 exam sittings, and with these 4 exam sittings, examiner can test anything. So better be prepared for everything. So a lot of times students ask me, should we prepare for business risk or should we prepare for audit risk? No, you should prepare for all 3 of them. So no selective studies, right? Go and study each and everything. And yes, on my final day, I can give you some hints, but I would prefer that you focus on the entire structure of the AAA syllabus, and that's the only way you can be successful in your exams coming up. Okay, it's time to say goodbye to all of you, and have a nice day ahead. And I'll be seeing you live tomorrow for day 4, where the focus is on the question number 3. And I hope you had a productive session today. Looking forward to your feedback. There will be a feedback form coming after the session ends today. Please fill in the feedback form very carefully, because that's very important. And please keep dropping your feedback on the WhatsApp group as well. I wish you all best of luck for your exams coming up on the 2nd of December. And I'm signing off from the day 3. Goodbye and Allah Hafiz.